I'm Amy Weirich, District Attorney. Today I'm releasing to the public the complete Tennessee Bureau of Investigation investigative file into the fatal shooting of Abdullah Thiam by an on-duty Memphis Police Department officer on January 2nd of 2019. When this fatal shooting happened, I was notified by the Memphis Police Department. I, in turn, immediately contacted TBI and asked them to begin an investigation. At the end of that investigation, they submitted a thorough file to our office for review for the determination of whether any state criminal laws were broken by the officer or officers involved in the fatal shooting. Our team reviewed the complete file. We reviewed the law that applies to these cases. And at the end of that review, it is my conclusion that no criminal charges should or can be filed against any of the officers involved in this fatal shooting. It is not our job to determine if police policy or procedure or civil law has been broken. Our review is strictly for state criminal law. I am sharing with you, the public, everything that our office had in reaching this determination. I'm also sharing with you a brief PowerPoint that will go through some of the facts and a few of the body-worn camera footage that we had available to us. Shortly after 8:20 on January 2nd, 2019, officers of the Memphis Police Department were called to 1317 Timothy Drive in response to a domestic disturbance. Police communications advised that the 911 call originated from a disconnected cell phone belonging to a Muhammad Thiam. The caller of that call has never been identified. When the officers arrived, 20-year-old Abdullah Thiam was in the front yard of the home holding a knife. That's a picture of the deceased and a photograph of the home. In an earlier incident, 2 years before, police had been called to that same home on Timothy Drive when Thiam threatened to kill family members with a steak knife. In that incident, Thiam taunted the officers and urged them to shoot him. Family members indicated to law enforcement at the time that Thiam had received treatment and had been given drugs at a hospital, but that he was currently not taking any medication. They were not aware of what his diagnosis was. In the January 2019 incident, 4 officers arrived at the Timothy Drive location and saw Thiam in the front yard holding a knife. Thiam ignored the officer's commands to drop the knife. He then ran with the knife toward one of the officers who was located in the street. That officer fired his weapon as he was backing away from Thiam. Thiam collapsed near the curb. The officer's body-worn camera, though somewhat grainy, shows us what happened. Another officer's body-worn camera shows the incident from a different angle. It's a still frame showing the officer backpedaling as Thiam was running toward him with a knife. According to procedure outlined in a memorandum of understanding, Police Director Mike Rawlings immediately notified me of the incident. I, in turn, called the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation to examine the crime scene, compile evidence, talk to witnesses, to do everything they do when they investigate a case. This is a photograph of the TBI's violent crime response team outside of the 1317 Timothy Drive location. That is the knife that Mr. Thiam was holding. 3 of the 4 officers on the scene fired shots. The officer who was backing away said that at that point, I shot several shots at the individual who was running at me at a full sprint with a knife in his hand. An autopsy showed the cause of death to be multiple gunshots, including one in the chest, two in the right thigh, and one in the left thigh. There were no positive findings for drugs or alcohol. The legal analysis and the conclusion of law. In this situation, uniformed officers were forced to react moments after they arrived on a disturbance call. The suspect was in the front yard holding a knife, saying nothing, and giving officers no indication of his intentions. Although officers had their guns drawn, Thiam refused their orders to drop the knife. Instead, he raised it over his head and ran directly toward one of the officers. That officer backed up as he and two other officers fired in the direction of Thiam. Body camera video shows the suspect falling in close proximity to where the officer was. In Tennessee, a law enforcement officer is justified in using deadly force if the officer has probable cause to believe that the individual to be arrested poses a threat of serious bodily injury either to the officer or to others, unless they are immediately apprehended. In this case, the suspect clearly posed a threat of serious bodily injury to one or more officers, leaving them with no alternative but to make the split-second judgment to use deadly force. After a thorough review of all available materials and due consideration to the available defenses, it is my opinion that there are no criminal charges that can or should be filed against these officers. My finding has no bearing on police policy and procedure, and it does not pertain to any civil actions that may or may not be pursued. My only finding is that these officers acted lawfully and violated no criminal laws of the state of Tennessee.